German pilots couldn't believe what they saw. A B-17 bristling with guns from nose to tail, a fortress that looked more like a porcupine than a bomber, 16, 50 caliber Browning barrels at the ready, a chin turret glaring straight ahead, a flying promise that said, "Come at us head on and see what happens." But there was a catch, and it would decide everything. Picture the daylight campaign over Europe in 1943. Tight bomber boxes, contrails braided across a cold sky. The plan was bold. Hit targets deep in occupied territory and get everyone home in daylight. Except the return leg felt like a tightrope without a net. Long-range escorts weren't always there. Frontal attacks from experienced Luftwaffe pilots hit like a hammer. Head-on passes exploited a gap in forward firepower, and crews knew it. So the answer seemed obvious. If fighters couldn't escort bombers all the way, make a bomber that could escort bombers. Strip out what didn't shoot, pack in what did, add armor where crews needed it most, and bolt a powered turret under the nose so no one could slash in from 12 o'clock and live to boast about it. The result wore an awkward name but a thrilling idea. A B-17 conversion turned gunship, commonly known as the YB-40. On paper, it looked unbeatable. In photos, it looked invincible. In the air, it taught a hard lesson. Let me put you in that moment the first time a German formation rolled in and met this new silhouette. No Bombay doors, extra turrets in places. Pilots didn't expect. Twin guns at the chin, powered and stabilized, ready to track a head-on attacker the way a lighthouse tracks a storm. Imagine a young fighter ace lining up that classic frontal pass, and then seeing tracer lines reach out sooner, straighter, and angrier than before. German pilots couldn't believe the 16-gun B-17. For a few stunned seconds, it looked like the bomber had become the hunter. But the sky doesn't forgive trade-offs. Firepower is weight, and weight drags on every climb, every turn, every mile. Those gunship conversions carried more guns, more ammunition, more armor. They could and did throw a wall of lead that discouraged reckless attacks. Yet when the main bomber stream dropped its bombs and grew lighter, the gunships didn't. The formation surged, the gunships strained, and in that widening gap lay the flaw that would end the experiment. To understand what changed, look at the nose, before the chin turret. The forward defense of many B-17s relied on cheek guns, good weapons with limited arcs. A disciplined head-on pass could slice through the thin seam those arcs left uncovered. The powered Bendix chin turret closed that seam. 250s, remote-controlled from the bombardier's position, with smooth electric traverse and elevation. Simple idea, big impact. It gave crews what they'd begged for. True, forward-facing coverage. The instant it arrived, the equation for frontal attacks changed. That nose wasn't the only rethink. Engineers and armorers studied where gunners crowded each other, where reloads jammed under pressure, where visibility fell short in the worst moments. They adjusted gun positions to reduce interference, refined mounts, and improved sight lines. You can see those lessons embodied in the definitive B-17 variant, the G model, where the chin turret became standard. The Flying Fortress didn't just add metal. It added smarter metal in smarter places. But back to the gunship idea, the promise that a flying destroyer could shepherd bombers all the way out and back. When those gun-heavy conversions joined the stream, they occupied the most vulnerable slots, the ones predators loved to stalk. The first encounters were dramatic. That forward turret spoke with authority. Head-on attacks were harder to press home. Some broke off. Some took hits. In that sense, the concept worked as advertised, yet minute by minute, mile by mile. Physics quietly took its due. The lighter, bomb-free formations climbed a little faster, cruised a little quicker, and drifted a little farther ahead. And once a gunship slipped into the gray space between the stream and the horizon, it traded strength in numbers for the loneliness no crew wanted. Here's where the title of this story becomes a tightrope. German pilots couldn't believe the 16-gun B-17. Then it couldn't keep up. Both halves are true in their own way. The forward firepower stunned opponents who expected the old gap at 12 o'clock to still be there. But the operational reality, weight that couldn't be jettisoned, drag that couldn't be wished away, meant the very aircraft built to protect others risked becoming the one that needed protection most. Now look at what happened next, because this is where innovation and humility intertwine. The U.S. Army Air Forces and industry partners didn't discard the whole idea in frustration. They pulled out what worked, proved it, and scaled it. That chin turret, born in urgency, moved from a trial to a standard. Feature B-17GS rolled off lines with that unmistakable nose. In museums today, you can stand under a restored G model and see how cleanly the solution fits the problem. Forward coverage that denies the easiest attack. A small change in silhouette, a huge change in survivability. If you're wondering whether the gunship experiment achieved anything beyond a footnote, consider this. Combat is a ruthless teacher, but it teaches fast. Every pass that broke off early because a chin turret opened up. Every crew that returned because their nose could finally fight straight ahead. Those weren't abstractions. They were lives. The gunship didn't become the escort America hoped for. But the best part of the gunship became the escort every B-17 needed. A turret that erased the frontal blind spot and rewrote the risk calculus. And that opens the door to the real heart of our story. How crews felt the difference in the seat of their pants. The shift from bracing for a head-on slash to meeting it with a steady sight picture and a squeeze of a trigger. The morale change when a famous vulnerability finally had a timely answer. The way formation leaders adapted spacing and timing as forward coverage improved. The quiet confidence of knowing a pilot charging straight at you couldn't rely on the old gap anymore. Before we go there, let's frame the stakes. Daylight bombing was never going to be safe. It wasn't supposed to be. It was supposed to be possible, and possible meant iterating, sometimes. In public, always under fire. The YB-40 idea was a bold step taken under pressure. It was tested in combat. It fell short for a simple reason. It couldn't keep up once everyone else got lighter. But inside that imperfect machine was a perfect lesson, and a piece of hardware that would define the most recognizable flying fortress variant in history. As we peel back the layers, we'll trace how the chin turret moved from improvisation to standardization, how gun positions evolved to reduce interference, and how forward fire reshaped the deadly dance of the head-on pass. We'll do it with the same steady pace you'd want on a long mission. No rush, no drift, always on course. So here's my question for you as we roll into the next chapter. If you were designing a bomber to survive daylight combat in 1943, what single change would you prioritize first? Firepower, visibility, or formation tactics? Drop your thoughts below. Your perspective helps us tell these stories better, and it might be the comment that makes someone else see this history in a new light. Step forward into the nose with me and look through the bombardier's glass. Before the chin turret, head-on attacks exploited a narrow seam in the B-17's forward coverage. Cheek guns bit hard, but their arcs didn't fully meet in front. A disciplined pilot could streak in at 12 o'clock, fire, and flash past the gap before the gunners could swing through. Crews knew that seam by feel, like a draft in a sealed room, and they dreaded the moment when contrails ahead meant a straight-in pass. Now, imagine replacing that draft with a locked door, a powered chin turret, twin, 50 caliber Brownings under the nose, remote-controlled from the bombardier's station, with smooth electric traverse and elevation. Suddenly, the forward sector wasn't a seam to slip through. It was a cone of denial. You pointed, you tracked, you fired. The geometry changed. So did the confidence in the nose. That's the heart of our title. German pilots couldn't believe the 16-gun B-17. Then it couldn't keep up. The disbelief was real because the silhouette and the physics of that head-on dance had changed. But the story doesn't stop at the nose. Crews learned that firepower must be positioned where humans can actually use it. Waist gunners needed space to move without fencing each other in. Visibility in the tail had to match the speed and angles of modern attacks. As the design matured, gun positions were refined to reduce interference. Late production tail installations improved sight lines and protection. The definitive B-17G rolled from multiple lines with these lessons built in. Nose turret standard, gun stations optimized, the airframe evolving from experience rather than guesswork. Let's pull back and look at the big picture in 1943. Daylight bombing demanded precision, and precision demanded formation, tight boxes, overlapping fields of fire, altitude and timing tied together like gears. When a new gunship conversion joined those boxes, it looked like the missing gear, a B-17. Refitted to be an airborne escort. More guns, more ammo, more armor, more staying power in a fight. On paper, it promised to stiffen the back of the rear elements and spook anyone who tried that classic 12 o'clock slash. And for a moment, in the first passes of the first missions, it did. Pilots who expected the old gap met a nose that fought back immediately, with authority. Some attacks broke off earlier. Some strikes failed to land. The forward fire was no longer an afterthought. It was a plan. For crews who had memorized the feel of a head-on rush, that was no small change. But the sky keeps score with weight and drag. That same gunship carried what a standard bomber did not after bomb release. Extra guns, extra ammunition, extra armor that you couldn't jettison. When the mainstream dropped bombs and grew lighter, it climbed faster and cruised a shade quicker. Minute by minute, the distance opened. Formation makes a fleet. Separation makes a target. And once a gunship drifted a few miles astern, the very logic of its existence buckled. It had the teeth for a fight, but not the legs to stay with the herd. This is the hinge of our narrative. German pilots couldn't believe a B-17 that fought so decisively head-on. Then the same aircraft couldn't keep up with the very formation it was meant to protect. Both truths lived in the same airframe. Both were revealed in the same missions. And both drove the transition from a bold conversion to a smarter standard. Look closely at how that transition happened. The most important idea, the powered chin turret, moved from trial to doctrine. Factories integrated it cleanly into the B-17 GS nose, where it belonged from the start. The result is the unmistakable profile you see in museums today, a flying fortress with its forward blind spot sealed. Its bombardier empowered to fight head-on without begging the cheek guns to do a job they were never meant to do alone. Across assembly lines in Seattle and Wichita, in Long Beach, and Burbank, the G model became the definitive answer to forward sector weakness while maintaining the ruggedness that made the type famous. At the same time, the notion of a purpose-built escort bomber faded, not because courage was lacking, but because aerodynamics and mission flow wouldn't bend. You could bolt on more guns. You couldn't bolt on new physics. If the mainstream lightened and surged, anything that stayed heavy fell behind. The lesson was plain: give every bomber the tools to survive the most dangerous angles, and keep the formation coherent. Don't rely on a separate guardian that the flock can outclimb and outrun the moment the bomb doors close. Think about what that meant in the nose on a winter morning over Europe. The bombardier, who had always been the forward lookout, now had a real weapon to meet the threat he saw first. The turret's powered arcs made tracking smoother. The command to hold steady, 12 o'clock, became less a prayer and more a plan. Crews reported the psychological shift as clearly as the mechanical one. The front of the airplane didn't feel exposed anymore. It felt equipped. From there, refinements rippled through the rest of the airframe. Adjusted waist positions meant fewer elbows and more arcs. Improved tail installations meant less guessing about a low 6 o'clock mover. None of these changes turned a bomber into a fighter. They didn't need to. They made the bomber better at being a bomber under fire, keeping station, keeping pace, keeping discipline, and bringing crews home. Let's zoom out one more time to the campaign level. Formation tactics evolved alongside hardware. With sharper forward coverage, leaders could call turns and altitude changes with less fear of a head-on slash wrecking the timing. The speed of decisions improved because the worst seam had been stitched shut, and as more G models joined the stream, the new nose became a shared language. An expectation on both sides of the fight. Attackers had to rethink their approach vectors. Defenders could assume forward pressure rather than forward panic. That is why the Museum B-17 GS we walk under today don't just look different. They represent a different conversation between problem and solution. The chin turret isn't decoration. It's a sentence written in metal that says, "We learned quickly." And it was learned in the hardest classroom. Real missions, real losses, real crews betting their lives that the next small improvement would not be small at all when the time came. Hold on to that thought as we move into the crucible moments that prove the point. You'll see how the new nose changed the rhythm of a head-on attack from the first sighting to the break. You'll hear how gunners coordinated arcs without stepping on each other's fields of fire. And you'll feel what it meant for a crew to watch a frontal pass hesitate, wobble, and peel away instead of punching straight through. Before we dive into those engagements, I want to hear from you. If you've stood under a B-17G and looked up at that turret, what struck you first? The engineering, the visibility, or the simple audacity of putting a gun where the enemy liked to come calling? Drop your impressions and questions in the comments. Your insight shapes which angles we explore next and helps keep these stories sharp for the whole community. Slide into the bombardier's seat and look through that framed glass. Before the chin turret, a head-on attacker could ride the seam between the cheek gun's arcs, flash through 12 o'clock, and be gone before the traverse caught up. Crews felt that seam like a cold draft across the nose. Then came a powered Bendix-built chin turret. Twin 50S, smooth electric traverse and elevation, controlled from the nose, turning that draft into a locked door. Point, track, fire. The forward gap closed, and the rhythm of the frontal pass changed from brace and hope to hold steady and engage. Now widen the view. Daylight precision demanded tight formations and overlapping fields of fire. When a gun-heavy B-17 conversion joined those boxes, it looked like the missing puzzle piece. An airborne escort wearing bomber wings. It took the exposed slots, the places predators preferred, and said, "Try me." For the first passes on the first trials, the effect was immediate. Pilots who expected the old gap met forward fire that arrived sooner and stayed on target longer. Some attacks hesitated. Some broke off. The shock was real, and it's why our title rings true. German pilots couldn't believe the 16-gun B-17, but disbelief fades faster than drag. Firepower meant weight, and weight refused to leave after bomb release. When the mainstream dropped its loads and grew lighter, it climbed a little better and cruised a little faster. Minute by minute, the gun-laden conversions surrendered a few knots, then a few more. Formation makes a shield. Separation makes a target. The very ship meant. To stiffen the formation spine risked drifting into the gray space behind it. Alone, loud, and heavy. Hold that tension, because this is where smart engineering meets hard limits. You can add guns. You cannot add lift without cost, nor delete drag with a wish. The experiment proved two truths at once. Forward coverage mattered desperately, and an escort bomber that stayed heavy could not keep pace after the turn home. Those truths drove a pivot that saved lives. The best idea inside the conversion, the powered chin turret, moved from trial to standard. The definitive B-17 variant, the G model, wore that nose as a matter of course across multiple production lines. The Fortress did not become a fighter. It became better at being a fortress, stepped back into the nose. With the chin turret, the bombardier became the forward defender as well as the forward observer. The sight picture at 12 o'clock stopped feeling like a dare. The arc smoothed. The crew's language shifted from urgent improvisation to rehearsed response. Steady, nose on, tracking, fire. That psychological change mattered as much as the hardware. Confidence is a system, too. Move aft. Lessons from combat didn't stop at the nose. Waist positions were refined so gunners stopped colliding elbow to elbow while chasing fast beam attacks. Late tail installations improved visibility and protection where it was most needed. None of these adjustments promised a cinematic duel. They promised fewer blind spots, cleaner arcs, and fewer jams under stress. Small, specific fixes, born from operational debriefs, added up to a tougher ship in a tough sky. Zoom out to the campaign level. With the forward seam stitched, formation leaders could hold timing and altitude changes with less fear of a catastrophic head-on slash during a turn or climb. Attackers adapted, testing other vectors, looking for new seams. Defenders adapted, too, with a standardized nose that denied the old approach. In photographs from the period, you can see the difference at a glance. A B-17GS chin looks purposeful, not improvised, but the middle of our title still demands honesty. Then it couldn't keep up. That wasn't a rumor. It was an operational outcome. A gun-heavy conversion that could not shed its weight after the bomb run surrendered speed it could not afford to lose. The 8th Air Force evaluated the results, tallied what worked, and made the obvious choice. Give every bomber the forward tool it needs, and don't bet the mission on a Guardian that the flock can accidentally outrun. Hold that thought as we step into a real day over occupied Europe. The target is hardened, the route long, the air cold and crowded. Flak fences the ingress. Fighters probe the edges. In earlier months, a head-on pass might have felt inevitable at a critical waypoint. Inevitable and terrifying. With the new nose, that inevitability met resistance. Not invincibility, resistance. Enough to make an attacker think twice. Enough to turn a clean slash into an uncertain exchange. Enough, sometimes, to turn away a pass that would have been pressed home before. That is the pivot from shocking to standard, from couldn't believe to must account for. The laboratory was the sky, the data were lives, and the conclusion became metal on the nose of the G model. The escort bomber idea? It gave up the stage. The chin turret? It stayed and took a bow. Here's where I want your voice. If you were redesigning a combat bomber in 1943 based on frontline feedback, which change would you prioritize first? Powered forward fire, cleaner crew ergonomics at the waist, or improved tail visibility? Tell me why. Your reasoning helps us surface what matters most when theory meets combat, and the clock is ticking. Ready to see how those choices played out in specific engagements, and how museums today preserve the profile that tells the story at a glance. Walk with me through a single engagement, because in the details you can feel what changed. The formation holds level, trimmed, and steady. Contrails paint white rails across a blue winter sky. Ahead, specks harden into silhouettes. Fighters. Testing the front door they used to know so well. Before the chin turret, that door had a hairline crack. With the chin turret, it was a brace of steel. The bombardier settles behind the controls, thumbs light on the grips. The call runs through the interphone. 12 o'clock. Closing. No scramble, no desperate swing of cheek guns trying to stitch a gap they were never designed to cover. Instead, a smooth pivot, a clean lead, a short, controlled burst. Tracers don't wander, they arrive. The attacker hesitates, the timing breaks, and the pass becomes a problem for him, not a certainty for you. That is the turning of the screw. Subtle, specific, and decisive. The chin turret didn't turn a bomber into a duelist. It restored balance. It gave the forward watch a real tool rather than a hope. Multiply that across the stream. Nose after nose, turret after turret. And the head-on pass went from favorite tactic to calculated risk. German pilots couldn't believe the 16-gun B-17. Then it couldn't keep up, lives in that contradiction. Disbelief at a nose that finally bit back, and the operational reality that a gun-heavy escort bomber could not match a lightened formation's pace on the way home. Now slide aft to the waist. Combat reports and post-mission debriefs taught another quiet lesson. Firepower is only as good as the room a human has to use it. When gunners crowded shoulder to shoulder, arcs collided, elbows jammed, reloads fumbled. The evolution of the B-17's waist. Positions wasn't drama, it was discipline. Give each gunner space to swing, clear his lane, and keep the stream of fire steady. Small changes there made big changes in the way a formation absorbed a multi-vector attack. It's not glamorous, it's survival. To the tail, too, where visibility is everything. Late war tail installations increased what the gunner could see above and below, tightening the net at 6 o'clock where attackers love to live. Again, no magic, just better angles, cleaner mounts. Improved protection. These refinements didn't grab headlines. They cut seconds off reaction time when seconds decided who went home. Zoom out with me to the factory floor, because the front line and the production line were connected by a short, urgent wire. When the definitive B-17G emerged from Seattle and Wichita, Long Beach and Burbank, the chin turret wasn't an add-on. It was the face of the airplane. The visual language is unmistakable. A flying fortress with a purpose-built answer at 12 o'clock high. Museum aircraft make this obvious to the eye. Even today, stand under a G model and you can trace the logic from glass to guns to gear. The bombardier's station, the control grips, the powered mount that closes the once famous seam. It is engineering written in plain English. Fix the thing that kills you most. Now bring that back to the sky, to a day when flak stitched black flowers along the route and the radio crackled with terse bearings. With the new nose, the formation commander's calculus changed by inches that felt like miles. You could hold a turn a fraction longer without fearing a clean frontal slash through the lead boxes. You could climb on schedule, not in panic. You could fly the plan under pressure, which is what daylight precision demanded from the start. But honesty compels the other half of our title. Then it couldn't keep up. The escort bomber conversion carried what could not be jettisoned: guns, ammunition, armor, drag. When the mainstream dropped bombs, it breathed easier, climbed better, and edged faster. The conversion did not. The gap opened, at first a sliver, then a mile, then too many. Physics didn't argue. It simply separated the guardian from the guarded. That is where the idea faltered, not in courage, not in aim, but in energy that would not stretch far enough across a long route home. The response was pragmatic. Keep the lesson that worked, make the chin turret standard, and retire the configuration that could not keep pace. In the restrained language of test reports and official histories, you can hear the relief when a vulnerability gets a permanent fix. Frontal passes had been the most punishing, most psychologically wearing threat. The new nose blunted them. Not perfectly. Enough. Let's humanize this with a cockpit moment you can feel. The pilot holds formation in thin air, engine steady. The ship heavy but honest. The callouts are calm, almost ritual. Nose, 12, tracking. A short burst. He's braking. The ship does not lurch. It endures. The crew does not flinch. It works. That's the difference the turret made in the texture of a mission. Multiply it by dozens of aircraft in a box and hundreds in a stream, and you have a campaign that breathes a little easier without relaxing a single standard. I want you to picture a museum hall now. A B-17G stands on its gear, olive drab soft under the lights. Visitors drift past, reading placards, pointing at the belly turret, the wing dihedral, the rivers of rivets. But if you stand under the nose and look up, you can see the whole story in one glance. The bombardier's window, the powered chin mount tucked under the glass, the quiet assurance that someone listened, learned, and built the answer where it mattered. Across the country and across the Atlantic, preserved aircraft and authentic training turrets tell the same story in aluminum and steel. The fix is visible. The lesson is permanent. And yet, the dramatic image that started it all, the gun-laden bomber meant to shepherd its peers, remains a powerful what if? What if weight had been less? What if engines had been more? The history we actually have is better than the thought experiment, because it is specific. The escort bomber did what prototypes must do. It surfaced the idea that survives and shed the one that doesn't. The chin turret stayed. The rest stepped aside. As we carry this forward, ask yourself, when a wartime design must choose between more guns in one place or the right gun in the right place on every airplane, which path makes the formation stronger? That's not a rhetorical question. It's the exact choice the engineers and commanders faced. Tell me your take in the comments, because the trade-offs they made then echo into how we think about survivability, standardization, and doctrine now. In our next stretch, we'll walk through how forward fire reshaped attacker playbooks, what changed for a pilot deciding whether to commit to a head-on pass, how defenders coordinated nose, top, and cheek to turn a clean line into a contested space, and why. The G-model's profile became the shorthand for no more free ride at 12 o'clock. Shift your eyes from the glass to the sight ring and think about timing. A head-on pass only works if the attacker owns the rhythm. Close fast, fire first, and be gone before return fire settles. The chin turret stole that rhythm. With powered traverse and steady elevation, the bombardier no longer chased a ghost between cheek arcs. He led a real track with real authority. Short, disciplined bursts replaced frantic sprays. The favorite angle of the war lost its favorite certainty. Now layer in the rest of the crew. The pilot holds the box. The top turret shadows the nose, ready to take the baton if the attacker drifts high. Cheek gunners keep the seam tight on either side, not as the first answer, but the second and third. This choreography matters. It turns a single installation into a formation-level effect. One ship's nose buys another ship a heartbeat. A heartbeat buys alignment. Alignment buys survival. Slide aft again. Waist stations learn to breathe. Elbows clear, arcs clean, reloads smoother. So a slash from the beam didn't turn into a tangle of bodies and belts. In the tail, improved sight lines meant a 6 o'clock mover could be tracked without guesswork, the mount working with the gunner instead of against him. None of this looked glamorous. All of it looked like results on a sortie board. Let's talk muscle memory. The chin turret didn't just arrive on airplanes. It arrived. In training, crews drilled the motions until the call and response became reflex. 12, steady, tracking, fire. The powered mount rewarded economy. Small corrections, short bursts, no wasted traverse. A good bombardier became a quiet constant at the front, spotter, defender, and, when the run began, the one who shifted back to his original duty with a forward sector already under control. Picture the first seconds of contact after those changes took hold. The attacker sets up, expecting the old window. Instead, he meets tracers early, straight, and sustained. He has choices now, all worse than the one he hoped for. Break off, take hits, or convert to a more complex approach that burns time and altitude. Overlapping fields of fire were always the theory. The chin turret made the overlap real at the very point that used to be thin. But we owe the other half of the title its due. Then it couldn't keep up. The gun-heavy conversion carried penalties that didn't disappear with the bombs. Extra guns, extra ammunition, extra armor. Energy you paid for on every climb and every mile. After release, when standard aircraft grew lighter and the box breathed easier, the conversion did not share the breath. A few knots of deficit became a few miles of separation. And in daylight doctrine, miles are meaning. Inside the stream you are a fortress among fortresses. Outside it you are a silhouette against a very large sky. That is not a failure of courage. It's a lesson in margins. The answer was to keep what worked everywhere, the forward fix, and let go of what could not keep pace. Factories baked the lesson into the airframe. Production G models rolled out with the chin turret as a native feature, the profile unmistakable from the museum floor to archival photos. A fortress with its forward promise made good. Walk the line beneath a preserved G and you can read the design like a checklist. Bombardier's position forward, sight and grips within easy reach, clear field under the nose, powered traverse ready for an attacker who thinks seconds are still free at 12. Behind it, stations that no longer crowd each other. A tail position that sees more and guesses less. The airplane does not look angrier. It looks prepared. Now back to the air, where preparation meets pressure. The formation commander calls a turn through flak. In the old rhythm, a head-on slash during the maneuver was the nightmare. Nose arcs chasing geometry they couldn't quite hold. With the chin turret, that moment stayed dangerous but lost its inevitability. Defensive fire began sooner, steadier. Attackers had to adjust or concede the pass. Each adjustment cost them the one thing they could not replenish in combat. Time aligned with advantage. Here's the subtle gift the forward fix gave the rest of the ship. It bought calm. Calm kept the pilot trim on the step, the engineer on the gauges, the navigator on the line, the radio operator clear on the net. Calm meant the crew fought the mission, not the airplane. And calm travels. One nose holding firm steadies the wingman. A steadied pair steadies a box. Let's peel back the attacker's playbook after the change. A frontal commit now meant meeting an aimed cone from the nose. Backed immediately by top and cheek if you drifted a hair high or wide. A shallow weave too. Spoil aim still walked you into those secondary arcs. A late jink could shake sight for a heartbeat, but risked overbanking into belly or beam fire. The cleanest solution, press straight and trust the gap, no longer existed. That's how doctrine moves. One reliable move removed from the board forces every other move to cost more. If you've ever stared up at that turret in a museum and thought, it's small compared to the whole airplane, you're right, and that's the point. Small, specific fixes at critical points reshape entire problems. A better nose did not make the sky gentle. It made a brutal tactic less reliable. In daylight operations, that trait alone could decide whether a crew wrote a letter home or had one written for them. Now, about the paradox at the heart of our title. German pilots couldn't believe the 16-gun B-17, then it couldn't keep up. Both halves matter because they explain why the final answer looks the way it does. The disbelief belongs to the moment the forward gap closed and the attacker's favorite angle lost its privilege. The couldn't keep up belongs to the strategic choice not to make every bomber heavier than its mission could carry. The resolution is the G-model nose. The idea that worked, standardized where it helped and nowhere it hurt. Set that profile beside the logic of formation. Daylight precision depends on timing, altitude, spacing, and mutual defense. Every extra pound you carry must earn its way across all four. The chin turret earned its place with seconds saved at 12. The rest of the gunship loadout did not, because seconds saved in one fight cannot pay for minutes lost to separation. That is wartime math. Cold, unforgiving, and necessary. Here's where I want you in the cockpit with your judgment. If you had one design token to spend on a 1943 bomber, would you spend it on a single airplane that fights harder, or on a single feature that makes every airplane fight smarter? Tell me in the comments which way you'd go and why. Your logic is part of the story we're telling, because this history is a chain of choices under pressure, and choice by choice, the Fortress became the airplane we recognize today. In our last leg, we'll bring it home. The operational verdict on the escort bomber idea, the rise of the standardized G-model nose across multiple lines, and the human aftermath. What crews said it felt like when the front of their airplane finally met a head-on threat. With something more than hope, we'll finish where every mission aims to end. Wheels on friendly concrete and a calm engine run down. With a clear ask from me to you to keep these stories flying. Bring it home with me. Because the verdict on our title lives in the way the story ends. German pilots couldn't believe the 16-gun B-17. Then it couldn't keep up. The disbelief belonged to the nose. The chin turret closed the old seam at 12 o'clock and took the rhythm away from the head-on pass. The couldn't keep up belonged to the concept. An escort bomber that stayed heavy after bomb release surrendered pace and position when the formation breathed lighter. In the cool language of operational results, the path forward was obvious. Standardize the fix that saved seconds at the nose, and retire the extra weight that cost minutes on the way home. Watch how that choice reshaped the airplane we remember. As production ramped, the B-17G rolled out with the forward turret as a native feature. Not an add-on, not a field improv, but the face of the aircraft. You can see the logic from 30 paces in any preserved example. An unmistakable chin, a bombardier station with real forward authority, and gun positions refined so people could actually use the power the airframe carried. The Fortress didn't become a fighter, it became a better fortress. One that denied the enemy's favorite angle and held formation with the steadiness daylight precision demanded. Now shift from metal to mission. With the forward gap closed, the formation's calculus changed. A turn called through flak no longer felt like an invitation to a clean frontal slash. Timing held tighter, altitude changes were less fraught. The chain of mutual defense, nose to top to cheek, worked as designed, not as wish. Attackers adapted, angling for beam and quartering passes, testing for new seams. Defenders adapted, too, building crew coordination around the certainty that 12 o'clock was no longer a free lane. 1. Installation in one spot changed everything everywhere, because it changed the most dangerous seconds for everyone. And the escort bomber? It left us with exactly what a bold prototype should. A single, proven lesson carried forward at scale. The rest of the package, extra guns, extra ammo, extra drag, couldn't pay its way across a long route home. Physics wrote the after-action report, and the program stood down. That's not failure, that's throughput. Combat took an idea, stripped it to what worked, and welded that one answer into the production line. If you want to feel the human texture of that change, sit with the crew on a hard, cold day. The pilot trims on the step. The engineer watches the needles. The navigator holds the line. The radio stays clear. Up front, the bombardier hears the comm call. 12 o'clock, tracking, and answers with a short burst from a mount built to do exactly this. The attacker wobbles, or widens, or breaks, and the formation breathes. Not easily. Easier. That difference is the chin. That difference is the G. Walk under a museum B-17G and look up at the nose. You are looking at a decision. It says, when the threat comes straight at you, meet it straight on. It says, fix the one seam that turned timing into terror. It says, put the right tool in the right place on every airplane, and let formation, training, and discipline do the rest. That is why the nose is the line we use to draw the boundary between before and after. Now close the loop on our title one last time. German pilots couldn't believe the 16-gun B-17 when they met a nose that finally had the power and precision to deny the head-on pass. Then the gun-heavy escort bomber couldn't keep up with the very stream it was meant to protect. The resolution was simple and elegant. Keep the disbelief where it helps, at the nose of every fortress, and drop the drag that turns guardians into stragglers. That's wartime math, measured in seconds gained and miles not lost. So here's where I hand the yoke to you. If you had one change to make a daylight bomber harder to kill, Would you spend it on a universal fix like the forward turret, or on extra firepower concentrated in a few airframes? Tell me in the comments. Make the case. Your reasoning, trade-offs, tactics, human factors keeps this history alive and sharp. If this deep dive earned your time, do the two things that actually keep projects like this in the air. Tap the like button and subscribe. It costs nothing, and it tells the platform to show these stories to more people who care. And if you've stood under a B-17G, or trained on a turret, or have a family story that crosses these contrails, share it below. This channel isn't just a narrator. It's a hangar full of voices, and yours belongs here. Thanks for flying this mission with me. The next story is already warming up on the ramp. Wheels up when you are. Hit subscribe, ring the bell, and I'll meet you at 12 o'clock.